Welcome to the RotoWire Prospect Podcast. I'm your host, James Anderson, and got a great show for you tonight. We'll be talking dynasty prospects and pickups and drops, and I've got Taylor Corso and Kyle Sonntag back. They were on earlier in April, and it was one of my favorite episodes of the year, so wanted to get them back for another similar version where we just kind of go around the horn and talk about prospects that we're digging, and in this case, maybe some prospects that we're throwing back towards the end of the show. We'll get to those guys. We're basically going to be going here in Fantrax order of guys who are rostered in more leagues to guys who are rostered in those deeper leagues, and have decided that Taylor gets to go first here. So Taylor, welcome back to the show. And I guess first, actually, congrats to both of you guys on getting to 100 episodes of your guys' podcast. I was happy to make a guest appearance on that. But Taylor, welcome back to the show. Which prospect do you want to highlight that you've recently added in a dynasty league?
Yeah, first, thanks for having me back on, and thanks for being part of our 100th episode. Really meant a lot to me and Kyle. But all that being said, one of the names that kind of popped up in that episode is one of my names I'm going to throw out here first, and that's Jared Thomas, outfielder for the Colorado Rockies, 9% rostered on Fantrax, 21 years old, just got the call to Double-A, so he makes his debut there today. I didn't get a chance to see, what he did in his debut, if he's already made it, but listed at 6'2", 190, left-handed hitter. And I got to give credit to Kyle for this one. He called him out as an FYPD sleeper this offseason, and he really has played the part. Was 42nd overall pick in last year's draft. Had a short cup of coffee last year's professional season, 333 average, 934 OPS, and has done more of the same this year, putting up a 330 average and 922 OPS at high A there before the promotion, 11 home runs and 22 stolen bases in 73 games. So really showing off the power speed. And it really ticked up in June, I think, and that's what forced the Rockies' hand with the promotion, as he had a 371, 446, 588 slash in June with 5 home runs and 6 stolen bases in 23 games. And during that stretch, 10.7% walk rate, just a 17.9% strikeout rate. And overall in the year, 74.1% contact rate, which is pretty solid there. Scouts at Prospect Live gave him 50 hit, 50 power, 50 field, 55 throw, and 55 runs. So average or better tools across the board. And Tyler Patter, who did our scouting report, said that, because of his projectable frame, he could eventually get into plus raw power, but could see him hitting, 20, 25 home runs or more per season. You add that to the above average speed. There's a lot to like here. 9% rostered on Fantrax, so he's been picked up in quite a few leagues, but I think some people dropped him after a little bit of a slow May there. And, I was able to go out and pick up several shares this week upon the news of the promotion to Double-A. And I think, if you're in a league of 150 plus prospects, you should go out there and see if he's on your wire.
Yeah, that's a great name to throw out there. Jared Thomas with the Rockies, who has definitely been someone that, I've been in my draft bunker getting ready for the 2025 draft. But Jared Thomas is definitely someone I've noticed multiple smart analysts pumping up, and he had some fairly stark home road splits at high A. Pretty good place to hit there in Spokane, but I think it's just a really awesome season for Thomas, and doing pretty much everything well so far. The Double-A performance, a pretty big test for him, just given that he is 22 already and is kind of a corner outfielder probably, but absolutely should be rostered in leagues that size. I'll throw it over to Kyle for one.
Yeah, I just wanted to start by also thanking you for, having us on once again. And like Taylor said, for joining us for our 100th episode. It was fantastic to have you on, and really everybody on. But my first name here, similar to Taylor's, is someone that just recently got promoted too. I am sorry for that. We'll take that squeaky ball away from my dog. So sorry. My first name here is Carter Jensen. He was recently promoted to AAA. Got off to a bit of a slow start this year. April was a little bit rough, but really turned it on when the calendar flipped over to May. He was slashing 324, 388, 473 from May 1st to June 22nd. And the cutoff there, June 22nd, is because that's when he got promoted to AAA. Now, in AAA, it's been a relatively small sample of just 7 games, including today. And the overall numbers aren't fantastic. But after today's game, he has now 4 home runs at the level, 3 in the last 2 days, including a 2 home run game just yesterday, and has just 1 other hit, which also went for extra bases, and that was a double today. So he's been hitting the crap out of the ball when he has been hitting it in AAA, and really that's a trend that has continued from not only the rest of this season, but past seasons as well. Jensen has always had really good power, but there's been maybe some approach issues, but a little bit of swing and miss too. And that is what has really caught my eye this year, because his contact rates are up significantly, really going from below average in general to above average at this point. And that's what's kind of been the big difference maker for him so far this year. Now, obviously, the catching job in AC isn't necessarily up for grabs right now, but I don't think it's any secret that Salvador Perez probably is nearing the end of his career, at least as a catcher. Who's going to tell him that he's not going to keep playing baseball? He could keep DHing and playing first base as long as he wants. But the next names in line there are Freddie Fermin and Luca Tresh, and I don't see either of them as real candidates to take that catching job over Carter Jensen. So I think there's a very real chance that Carter Jensen could be the opening day starting catcher next year if he can perform well in AAA for the rest of the year here, and maybe he even gets a cup of coffee to finish off the season. But after the hot start that he's had so far this year, I've got him as a borderline top 100 prospect right now, top 10 prospect at the catching position. But because he's a catcher, he's available out there in a lot more leagues than you might expect, despite the fact that he is 14% rostered on Fantrax. So I think Carter Jensen is a name that even in relatively shallow leagues, you should go take a look on your wire and see if he's a potential upgrade over whatever prospect catcher you have right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you talked about how he came on so strong. I dropped him in my rankings just because of his slow start to the year and just the time of when I released the rankings. But yeah, I mean, it's just such a fun profile just to have a guy that could potentially be a power speed catcher who's that close to the big leagues. And yeah, Jensen he had a lot going for him coming into the year. It's great that he's kind of rounded into form. Over at RotoWire.com, we've got some minor league hard hit data from Sports Info Solutions. His 31.4% hard hit rate is fantastic, especially for a catcher who's age appropriate and honestly like younger than age appropriate. He's still just 21, already at AAA. So yeah, I love the Jensen call out. And then also, I should have probably mentioned this at the top, but use code PURPLE to get 25% off RotoWire until July 7th. We've got a real fresh new site, fresh new logo. So I hope you guys are digging that. Yeah, I mean, Carter Jensen, Jared Thomas, some great shallower league dynasty names to throw out there. I know we've got some diehards that are just like, yeah, those guys are long gone in my dynasty league. We'll be getting to you guys in a second here. My sort of shallowest guy that I want to throw out is Max Anderson, second baseman with the Tigers. He's at AA right now. He's 6% rostered in Fantrax. And Anderson has really kind of always been sort of a bat first player, a hit over power prospect generally is sort of how I've thought of Anderson, but hard hit rate is really solid this year. He's got such a compact swing that I think he'll always be hit over power, but he gets to plenty of power. Among qualified AA hitters who are roughly age appropriate, it's Hector Rodriguez with the Reds, who's 12% rostered, Anderson, and then Cardinals catcher Leonardo Bernal, who's actually 6% rostered. Bernal, another name to keep in mind here. Those are the only AA hitters with a strikeout rate under 16% and an ISO over 175. And Max Anderson's hitting for way more power than the other guys. I just kind of had a very liberal set there. But yeah, I just think Anderson, it's bad only basically. Like he's not a guy that I think is going to forced the issue with his glove, but so it's almost a little too similar to guys like Colt Keith maybe. They've got a few of these guys that are just sort of hitting mavens that are kind of without a defensive home or an obvious one, but Anderson probably deserving a promotion to AAA soon. He also finished really strong at high A last year. I know his surface stats at high A maybe don't jump off the page, but he was just a completely different player in the second half there. So just looking at what Max Anderson's done offensively, like, it's not a big time speed profile or anything like that, but just I'm digging the bat, and think he's kind of pushing, top 125 or so, something like that. Throw it back to Taylor for one.
Yeah, I'm going to stay in the NL West here. I talked about the Rockies in my first pick. I'm going to go with the Padres here in Braden Nett, right-handed pitcher, 6% rostered on Fantrax. Definitely a guy getting a lot of helium right now. We've talked about the 100th episode a couple of times, but this was the only guy highlighted twice. So he's 6'3", 185 pounds at AA, 23 years old. And he was an undrafted free agent that the Padres signed out of the MLB Draft League in 2022. Got up to AA last year, but the biggest issue with him has been the walk rate. The control just hasn't been there. This year, it looks like he's made some improvements in that regard. He's lowered his walk rate by 4%. It's the lowest rate since he was in complex ball. And I think the most encouraging thing is it's gotten better as the season has gone on. You look at his season-long slash line, it's not going to impress you much, but since May 1st, he has a 1.91 ERA, 1.21 WHIP, and a 9% walk rate, which is, again, fairly high, but much better than what he's shown in the past. But when you look at what he's done since June 1st, it's a 1.29 ERA, backed up by a 2.19 FIP, a 1.11 WHIP, and a 7.1% walk rate. Basically since the calendar flipped to May, he's been outstanding. He's thrown 5 innings in 8 of his 9 starts. Since May 1st, and has often gone 6 innings. So he's throwing deep into games, which is what you want to see because of the proximity there at AA and the Padres, numerous rotation issues and injury issues. There's a really good chance that we see Nett in the bigs this year. And this is a really good sort of proximity arm to keep in mind here. The one thing I will say is, the Padres can be fairly aggressive, so that promotion could come at any time. But on the same token, Nets showed that, he's not necessarily out of the woods yet with the control. In his last start, he did walk 4. So it kind of put a little bit of cold water on, some of the recent improvements he's showing, just showing that, that he can lose that command from time to time. But overall, it's a really fantastic arsenal. He's got a plus mid-90s fastball. He's got a cutter, slider, and curveball that, sort of depending on who you ask, may range, each of those secondaries may range from average to plus. And, the changeup is kind of another pitch that he has that lags behind everything else. And obviously the control is really the biggest question with him. But overall, I think, if you're in a league of 200 plus prospects, he's a must add. If you're in a league of 150 plus or 100 plus, he's somebody that you might want to consider adding if that sort of proximity arm with upside is something that you're interested in.
Yeah, Nett has been a guy that I've sort of had on the back half of the top 400 before, where it's just kind of waiting for that command to kind of be more consistent. And, is he a reliever? Is he a starter? But I love it when guys like that sort of have a really strong showing and can kind of give us a bit more faith that they can be starters. And the Padres are not going to be shy about promoting him if they think he's ready or if they think he needs a challenge. So, I really like that call. And, it could be even one of those things where he gets just like a tiny taste of the big leagues and shows enough, like with the stuff plus and stuff like that, where his value is kind of peaking towards the end of the season, even though he only makes a handful of appearances. So like that call. Kyle, why don't we get another one from you?
Yeah, so much like Taylor stuck in the NL West, I'm going to stick in the AL Central here, and I'm moving over to the Chicago White Sox with infielder Sam Antonacci. He is 22 years old, plays a little second base, a little third base, currently in high A, and he's just 2% rostered on Fantrax right now. But at Prospects Live, we've moved him all the way up to 236 overall in our prospect rankings in our June update. And this is a guy that really went under the radar as a 5th-round pick of the White Sox in last year's draft, but he kind of put himself on the fantasy radar a little bit with a 170 WRC plus through a 23-game pro debut. Now, it was at single A, and he is a bat-first college draftee, so it's relatively expected that he was going to perform well at the level in that debut, but he's arguably been even better this year with a 163 WRC plus in high A, along with 4 home runs and 21 stolen bases so far. Now, it's still a hit over power profile, so it's not super surprising, again, that he is still performing well as a college draftee in the lower levels of the minors. But with contact rates around 90% and a swinging strike rate below 5%, it might just be a plus or better hit tool, and I think that could help his modest power play up a bit. Our scouts did give him a 55 grade hit, 40 grade power, and 55 run. But as I just said, I think the hit tool is even better than that. And while the overall swing rate is a little bit passive, I think it's mostly a selective approach. And he's just kind of swinging at pitches he knows he can do damage on. Now, he does put the ball on the ground a little bit too much, and that doesn't help the power potential here. But the main thing is that we just need to see him perform against more advanced pitching in the upper minors. And this is a guy that's going to be available all over the place because despite the strong performance and despite how far we've pushed him up the rankings at Prospects Live, this is somebody that until I recently added him was completely unowned in all of my dynasty leagues. And I think I'm in about a dozen of those right now. So Sam Antonacci should be widely available out there. And I think he's comfortably in the kind of 250 range right now for prospects. So you can go and grab him in all sorts of leagues out there.
Do you think maybe a guy across town, Nico Horner, could be like a comp for him? Maybe.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's a fantastic comp with the hit tool and the way that he can run. I don't know that he's going to put up some of the upper end stolen base numbers that Nico Horner has, but I do think it's a similar profile.
Yeah, just always tough to know what type of over the fence power is going to show up with these types of guys when they get a little closer to the big leagues. And like he is, like you said, he is still at high A. So double A will be a bigger test for sure. I mean, that's true of all these guys, but like you said, he's widely available. That swinging strike rate below 5% at multiple stops, definitely something that makes you look a second time there at Sam Antonacci with the White Sox. Let's head to a quick break, but when we come back, I will talk about a Brewers pitcher that I recently added, and I suggest you do the same. The NFFC RotoWire Fantasy Football Online Championship is live. Play fantasy football against your favorite RotoWire experts on NFFC this football season. Jeff Erickson, Nick Whalen, and more will compete in the RotoWire NFFC Online Championship for a shot to win $250,000. Sign up for a draft today at rotowire.com/high stakes. That's rotowire.com/high stakes. Can the weather really help a baseball travel further? Turns out, yes, the air can affect how far a baseball carries by up to 20%. Home Run Forecast uses real-time weather data to rate each game's conditions for ball flight, assigning every matchup a 1 to 10 score based on how home run friendly the air is. On the premium site, you'll get game-by-game, hour-by-hour index values, 24-hour forecasts, wind direction, roof status, and more for less than $6 a month. Check it out at homerunforecast.com and gain a weather edge before first pitch. All right, we're back here on the RotoWire Prospect Podcast. If you missed it, use code PURPLE for a 25% off RotoWire subscription until July 7th. That's code PURPLE. Celebrating our site redesign, which is really cool. Can't wait to have some merch to rep on the podcast for that. But back here with Taylor Corso and Kyle Sonntag from Prospects Live. We're going through some prospects we've all recently added in dynasty leagues. We covered Jared Thomas, Carter Jensen, Max Anderson, Braden Nett. They're all rostered in 6% or more of leagues. Sam Antonacci also got brought up, rostered in 2% of leagues. I'm going to throw out Ethan Dorchies, righty with the Brewers at single A. He's rostered in 3% of leagues. And Dorchies was the guy that I shouted out on my little cameo on your guys' 100th episode. But, you know, he it's really just all about upside. Like the risks are obvious when you got a 18-year-old righty single A. Anything can go wrong. A lot of times everything does go wrong, but Dorchies won't turn 19 until after the season. It's just one of those really, classic 6'5", all the projection in the world types of frames. And, fastball, like I almost kind of like it when the fastball is in the low 90s for a guy like this, because I just think it's like there's a bunch of velocity coming and you just kind of want to keep it in check and hope he doesn't blow out his arm. His splitter is a really nasty pitch, and just seems like the Brewers are handling him like a premium asset. And I think he's got that type of trajectory from a prospect value standpoint. Like, I'm not going to bet that Ethan Dorchies gets to the big leagues without any hiccups along the way, but I think there could be a point before he gets to the big leagues where he's viewed as a top 50 prospect, top 100 prospect. So you could cash him out at that point. You could see where it goes, but Ethan Dorchies in a fantastic organization, still available in 97% of Fantrax leagues. Throw it over to Taylor for one.
Yeah. My next name is not going to be in the NL West. It's going to be somebody in Canada, and that is Yohendrick Pinango. He's outfielder for the Blue Jays. Happy belated Canada Day to Kyle there. He's outfielder for the Blue Jays, 5% rostered on Fantrax, 23 years old, a left-handing hitter at AAA, listed at 5'11", 170. And, he was the return piece in the Nate Pearson trade to the Cubs last season. Obviously, Nate Pearson did not work out as well as a lot of Blue Jay fans had hoped, but maybe they got something out of that whole situation anyway with Pinango. Now, many people who've been playing Dynasty for a long time probably are familiar with his name. He's been playing in the minors since 2019, so he's been around very long time. Always been a hitter with good EVs, great contact skills, but has never really been able to kind of bring that power in game outside of a really short high A stint at the start of 2024. This year, he appears to have finally harnessed that power. He absolutely dominated AA with the 170 WRC plus, 8 home runs and a 224 ISO in 47 games there, before getting the promotion to AAA, where it's basically been more of the same. In 24 games there, he has 4 home runs and a 207 ISO. The AAA slash line doesn't really stand out, just 218, 340, 425, but it's dragged down by a 217 BABIP, and it's the StatCast that really stands out with Pinango. He currently ranks 100th percentile at the level with it in xWOBA and 90th percentile EV. That EV is 108.4. He also ranks 76th percentile or higher in average EV, max EV, barrel rate, hard hit rate. And it's not just the quality of contact either. The contact and approach has been fantastic as well. He ranks 76th percentile or higher in chase rate, whiff rate, zone contact rate, strikeout rate, and walk rate. The biggest, limiter for him is he just doesn't pull the ball in the air enough. That could hinder him, really keeping those power gains. The other thing is he's been kind of passive this year, but if you sort of look at his history, when he's been, average or aggressive is really where he struggled to show that power. And the one other time other than this year where he's been more passive has been in that short high A stretch that I mentioned, where he did show the power previously. So I think that's part of him really getting into that power, is kind of waiting around for his pitch to smash there. But I think the slash line will normalize. I think he's knocking on the door to the bigs. The Blue Jays have a lot of sort of, fringy outfield types that, it's kind of going to see who rises to the top. And I think Pinango could eventually be that guy. For me, he's a pickup in leagues of, 250 plus prospects.
Yeah, the Blue Jays have like just a bunch of they're mostly outfielders, but they all just kind of seem like about the same value guy, and you're just sort of hoping that the guy you're rostering gets a shot and does something with it. Just to further your point, Taylor, I want to just quickly go through Pinango's RotoWire prospect rankings history. He was ranked in July 2019. That might be as far back as those go. I'm not sure. Close, but he was ranked in July 2019. Then he came off. He was back on for January 2020. He came off in September of 2020. back on for March of 21, quickly back off June of 21, back on August 21, off January 23, on for about 3 months from May 24 to July 24, and then off and then back on for May of 25. So Pinango has been on and off the top 400 probably as much as any player who's currently on there right now. So that speaks to just how long he's been around, but just the amount of times he keeps being heard from. You just can't kill this guy. And now he's hanging around the AAA, like you said. He's close to the big leagues, and that 217 BABIP, obviously a big reason why his slash line isn't more impressive. Just like you said, it's just kind of an undervalued asset probably right now, especially just due to that unfortunate luck at AAA. All right, Kyle, let's get another one from you.
Absolutely. So I didn't realize this when I wrote all these names down, but I am once again sticking in the AL Central. And as weird as it sounds, I am sticking with the White Sox here. But this is one that I'm actually really excited about, and that's Tanner McDougal. He is a 22-year-old right-handed pitcher currently in AA in that White Sox system. And much like Antonacci, he is just 2% rostered on Fantrax. So he is widely available out there. And again, just like Antonacci, up until I added a couple shares recently, he was available in all of my dynasty leagues. So he will be out there in a lot of leagues. Now, McDougal is listed at 6'5", 185, but I've watched some video and he is much bigger than that. I would wager that he's put on at least 30 to 40 pounds since that measurement was last updated. It is a sturdy starter's build now, and he has the stuff to match because it is a big plus or better fastball that can touch triple digits and an absolute hammer of a curveball that might grade out right up there with the heater. Because when Fangraphs ranked the White Sox system back at the start of April, they listed him as number 12 in the system, and they reported that his curveball exceeds 80 miles an hour with more than 3,000 RPM. So this is a devastating breaking ball. Now, he also throws a changeup and a slider. They could be viable options down the road, but they do trail behind the high-end fastball and curveball. But with how strong that two-pitch combination is, it might be all he needs to find some success. Now, McDougal was a fifth-round pick by the White Sox back in 2021, but they gave him third-round money. And up until now, his control has really kept him mostly off the fantasy radar because he had yet to post a walk rate below 13.5% in any full season. And while his walk rate this year is still a tick over 12% overall, most of those walks actually came in his first handful of starts, and he has just one outing with more than 2 walks since the end of April and has posted a 10% walk rate over that span with a 33% strikeout rate to go along with it. Now, that one outing with more than 2 walks in that span was a 6-walk outing, so that alone really spiked the walk rate overall there. So you take that out and the walk rate looks fantastic over the last month and a half to 2 months. And that's backed up by his strike rate as well, as that has really improved because it is up to 62% so far this year after throwing strikes at just a 59% clip last year. And if we go all the way back to 2023, it was an even worse 57%. So he is progressively getting better at really the one skill you want to see him improve at with the big time stuff that he has. And there's enough improvement there to make me see a realistic outcome where he lands in the rotation long term. And while he might not be a frontline starter without further improvements to his command and either the changeup or slider, I can definitely see a high strikeout mid-rotation arm here. And while I'm not exactly sure where he's going to fall in my rankings the next time we update, I am 100% certain that he's going to be well inside my top 400, barring anything unforeseen happening between now and then. So Tanner McDougal is a name that I'm getting really quite excited about given those control gains as of late.
Reminds me a lot of like Sean Burke last year, where the walk rates had just been so high. Like we knew about Sean Burke. I don't think I ever ranked him till like the end of last year. And the first time he had like a walk rate below 10% was in the big leagues, but McDougal doing it at AA now. So like, it's not, the White Sox should not have the same stink on them as like an organization. I don't think developmentally as they did maybe a year or 2 years ago. Like doesn't mean they're like the best, but they're capable of doing stuff that we can appreciate. And yeah, I mean, just, even if it doesn't work out with McDougal, like he could be like a Ben Brown 2.0 type of guy, where at least you have like a window there where he's an in-demand asset. If you want to move off him, you could play it out and see where it goes. The 9th inning in Chicago, like I love Grant Taylor. That's probably still like up for grabs too. So lots of different outs with the McDougal pickup, but yeah, I love, kind of similar almost to the Braden Nett one, where it's like a guy where there was significant questions about how many strikes he was going to throw, and like now we might be seeing the guy actually throw enough strikes. Okay, my last guy that I'll give a full nod to here is Jose Urbina with the Rays, 2% rostered. He's obviously been around for a while. Like, he's one of those guys who always got brought up as some of the best stuff in the system, arguably the best stuff in the system, but just, a long way to go with the command. And he needed about twice as much time as Dorchies in rookie ball before being ready for single A. And then he even struggled in his first taste of single A, had to repeat that. So now Urbina is 19, but still has the premium stuff. He's starting to throw more strikes. I would not confidently bet on Urbina just going level by level, staying healthy, not seeing any sort of setbacks with his performance, but I think he's at least, an up arrow prospect. He's got a very high ceiling. The risk factors are clear, but like, everyone's chasing upside. The Rays, I think it's a good club to grab this type of pitcher on. So 2% rostered. If you want a pitching prospect with top 100 upside, I think Urbina is a good guy to go out there and grab. All right. We got time for some honorable mention talk here before we get to our drops. So Taylor, why don't you give us a few guys that you just want to talk briefly about that you've added in Dynasty Leagues recently?
Yeah, I'll do some quick hitters. Dakota Jordan for the Giants was an overslot 4th round pick this last draft. Has insane tools. Our very own Drew Wheeler at Prospects Live said he was like Bo Jackson with a blindfold on. And I think that's a good way to kind of describe him, because it's potentially double plus power, double plus speed, but everything is super raw. The hit tool, the ability to steal bases, the defense and center field. Even though he was a collegiate player, it's just, the skills were really raw. But it seems like this year, he's kind of starting to put some stuff together. The contact has been decent. The power has been coming around lately, and the speed has just been there throughout this whole year. He's stealing a ton of bases. Now, the biggest drawback with him is that, he just turned 22 and he's in single A. So, he should be beating up against lower level competition. The Giants have been extremely conservative with their promotions, but I think at this point he's super hot. I think he's homered in 2 straight games. Has over the last couple weeks, I think he has like 5 of his 7 home runs on the season or something like that have come just in the last few weeks. So things are trending up for him. Hopefully he gets that bump to high A. This could be more of a slow burn with him. I don't think he's going to move super quickly, as he has a lot to work on. But if you're looking for pure upside, I think Dakota Jordan is an excellent pick there. Gonna again stay in the NL West with Chase Harlan. So he was another draftee from last year's draft, another overslot pick, this time in the 3rd round by the Dodgers. Really, the hit tool and defense have been, I think, better than advertised so far this year. But the carrying tool was supposed to be his above average to plus raw power as a 3rd baseman in the Dodger system, and it really hadn't materialized up until his last 12 games. He had 0 home runs on the season, and then in the last 2 weeks, he has 6 home runs, along with 6 doubles, all coming in those 12 games, and is just 4% rostered on Fantrax. So he seems to finally be accessing that power. Like I said, the hit tool and defense have kind of ticked up more than they were expecting. It looks like he might actually be able to stick at 3rd base now. So, obviously Dodgers are really good development, but you have to wonder, sort of how this type of profile will eventually fit in their lineup. But he's 18 years old at complex league, so that problem is way, way down the road. and he's one I recommend. And then finally, I know haven't gone quite as deep as you guys on some of these picks, so I'm going to go super deep with this one. 0% rostered on Fantrax, and that's John Klein. Really interesting backstory. Local boy that grew up in Minnesota, got signed by the Twins out of a collegiate summer league in 2022. He actually didn't really pitch until JUCO because he was a catcher all throughout high school, kind of idolizing Joe Mauer. But eventually he grew to 6'5", and you can't really catch when you're that big. Has cannon for an arm, so decided to move to the mound. And right now he's throwing mid-90s fastballs, has a pretty good 12-6 curve that gets a ton of whiffs. He's got a slider and a changeup. Started out the year in AA in more of a relief role, but last 4 outings has switched to a starter's role, and he's absolutely thrived in that role. In those 4 starts, he has a 1.29 ERA, backed up by a 1.80 FIP, 0.57 WHIP, 35.2% strikeout rate, just a 3.7% walk rate. Again, this is at AA with the Twins. It's John Klein, and he's 0% rostered. So go pick him up out there in all your deep leagues.
Great stuff there from Taylor. And I mean, at the rate that the Twins big league pitching staff is going, maybe we hear from Klein before the end of the season. But yeah. All right. Kyle, what do you got for quick hitters here?
Yeah, so I am finally escaping the AL Central here. I got one hitter and then a couple of pitchers to quickly touch on. And the hitter I want to look at is Nathan Church. He's a 24-year-old outfielder in AAA in the Cardinals system. Also 2% rostered on Fantrax. And the main draws for Church are proximity and contact ability. And when I saw Church's profile, it immediately reminded me of Jacob Wilson because it's a lot of contact and not a ton of anything else. And while Wilson is posting, much better contact rates even, and in, the big leagues against much better pitching, it's worth noting that, what Nathan Church is doing from a percentile perspective relative to his peers in AAA stacks very comparatively to what Jacob Wilson is doing in the bigs. And then you add on to the fact that he's got a little bit more of an approach here than Wilson does. He is willing to draw a walk, and he's got some power potential, not a lot, but it wouldn't shock me if he gives you maybe, 10 home runs in a peak season. And the big thing here is that there's a ton of speed that allows him to steal 20 plus bases. He's on pace to do that for the 3rd straight season. And there is elite defense here with an absolute cannon of an arm that should help ensure Nathan Church fairly consistent playing time, if not everyday playing time, whenever he does make it up to the bigs, whether that be in center field or right field. Either way, his defense, his speed, his arm are going to play at one of those positions. I am looking at him in leagues of around 300 plus prospects rostered. And a big part of that, again, is the proximity. Without a ton of power, it's not a profile that I'm super, super in love with, but the proximity with all the other tools make him worth looking at. The 2 arms I'm looking at here are low-level pitchers and really could not be more different because I'm looking at Esteban Mejia and Chia-Shi Shen. Now, Esteban Mejia is an 18-year-old righty in complex ball for Baltimore who has been really getting actually a lot of hype lately. He's up to 5% rostered last I looked on Fantrax. And a big part of that is because Baseball America just recently put him inside their top 100. So he's getting a ton of hype as of late. It is a massive fastball, routinely touches triple digits, some pretty crazy movement characteristics. And he has a pretty solid arsenal too, with a bullet slider and a changeup that has tons of arm side fade, both of which sit over 90 miles an hour. So this is a true power arsenal. But the big thing here is the walks, because he's posted a 12.4% walk rate. That was last year. And it's actually gotten even a little bit worse with a 13% walk rate this year. So when you're looking at Esteban Mejia, there is huge upside here, but there's a ton of risk, both as far as injuries go, because anytime you're throwing that hard, that young, that far away from the bigs, as you said with Dorchies earlier, James, a lot of things can and usually do go wrong. And then there's a ton of reliever risk here as well. Now, on the flip side, Chia-Shi Shen doesn't have a ton of stuff, but has really strong command, as he posted just a 3.7% walk rate in complex ball before recently being promoted to single A. Now, Schenn is a bit of an interesting story because he was supposed to sign with the Athletics back in 2022. That fell through for reasons that I've been unable to find. And similarly, for reasons I've been unable to find, he didn't end up signing for 2 years until he just landed with the Mariners last summer as a late signee during the 2024 IFA period. Now, he did rack up a near 32% K rate in complex ball, but his stuff, as I mentioned earlier, is far from anything like Mejia's. The fastball is kind of low to mid 90s. He's got a slider and a changeup. The fastball and slider are more average to fringe average offerings, but his changeup is a more advanced pitch. So when you look at, a pitcher like this, advanced age, 21 years old in complex ball with advanced control and an advanced changeup, he really should have been dominating like he was. Now, what he does in single A is going to be interesting to monitor. He didn't have a great first start, so that's something to keep in mind. And, with both of these guys, Mejia and Schenn, I don't think I'm looking to add them in leagues any shallower than about 400 prospects rostered. But if I'm going to pick one of them, I'm probably going to prioritize the upside with Mejia over that kind of control first profile that Chia-Shi Schenn presents. But I do think that they are both really interesting names in the lower levels of the minors right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're right in my sweet spot with that Nathan Church recommendation of a AAA hitter who's about to turn 25, who's on the cusp of the big leagues, who's widely available. Love that type of thing. Esteban Mejia, I had a co-manager text me the other day, like, do we got to pick this guy up right away? Like, he's just added to BA's top 100. So, like, we can all value these guys differently, but you definitely got to be aware of that type of thing when it comes to just what a guy's value is. And, like, we can see the risk factors with a Mejia, with the bullpen risk, injury risk, like Henry Lolane with the Yankees, like a couple years ago, was getting the same type of buzz, and like he's been hurt ever since, basically. So this can go wrong quickly, but you might be able to flip him this off season. Like if he stays healthy, and a lot of people are talking about him that way, you might be able to flip him for something. So good to just be aware of that type of thing. So my honorable mentions, Dalen Lale with the Nationals is 9% rostered on Fantrax, which I don't really get. He, I think, should have been pushing 9% just based on what he was doing at AAA and AA earlier this season. Finally started showing signs of getting to power. Always been a guy that can run and put the ball in play. So I like Lale with the Nationals. And that's a shallow league ad, obviously. Malcolm Moore with the Rangers. If you're looking for a catcher ad, I just think he's 5% rostered. Most catchers with his type of offensive upside are, at least 10% rostered. So Malcolm Moore, the Rangers, more kind of like a two-catcher league type of ad if you're looking for help there. And then Trey Gibson with the Orioles. Just love the combination of ground balls and strikeouts, but he is a little old. I think he's 23 to still be at AA. So, and not like perfect, pinpoint command or control or anything like that, but just, always been pushing like 50% on the ground balls. And this year, strikeouts have been there. Walks are up a little bit, but Trey Gibson, 4% rostered. So that'll do it for our ads, our prospect ads in Dynasty Leagues recently. But, of course, to add players, we have to drop players. And sometimes I go out there and I'm like, I got to find a drop for this prospect I have to add. But then there's other times where I'm like, I got to drop these prospects. Like, who are the best guys I can add? So different ways to go about this. But Taylor, who's a prospect you've dropped recently?
Yeah. Obviously we talk about prospects to pick up every week. So we're always having to find somebody to drop. And, a name that I never thought would be on that list is Thomas Harrington. So 31% rostered, pitcher for the Pirates there. really, looked like he was going to be a solid part of their future coming into this year, coming off a strong season. I think he was the first of those Pirates young arms to get the call this year. Really struggled in the bigs, has struggled at AAA. And the biggest thing with me for him, and the reason why I had to drop him, is that his calling card is really the command. There's not a lot of upside with Harrington. He's more of that sort of back end, maybe his best outcome, a mid-rotation starter, but that all hinges on his plus command, and that really just hasn't been there this year. His walk rate has doubled at AAA. The strikeout rate has fallen down significantly, and obviously the Pirates have no shortage of promising young arms, and so at this point, I would rather invest in somebody with more upside rather than the guy who was supposed to have the floor but who's not showing the floor. So I dropped Harrington in a league recently. I had a choice between him and Caden Dana, who has had tons of struggles, but I still believe in his upside, more than I believe in, the supposed floor with Harrington. So at 31%, obviously rostered in a lot of places, but one that I'm willing to sort of send back there.
Yeah, that's a good one. And a good kind of Harrington versus Dana conundrum that we always have to reckon with when we're trying to figure out which guy to cut loose. And I have like kind of a building bias sort of against guys with the sort of the Harrington profile that come up and just struggle massively right away. Where we already know kind of coming in that, maybe there's not a plus pitch there. Maybe there's a couple above average pitches and a couple other average pitches, and we're hoping for it to be, above average command and pull the whole thing together. I think of like Adam Mazur with the Padres last year, now with the Marlins. Like these types of guys, when they come up and hitters just tee off consistently on their fastball right away, it's concerning because you can't just go back to AAA and like get better stuff. So yeah, I think Harrington's a good one to bring up there. All right, Kyle, who's a guy you've dropped recently?
Yeah, my first name here is James Triantos, 22-year-old second baseman, AAA with the Chicago Cubs. He is 27% rostered on Fantrax, and much like Harrington, this has kind of always been more of a floor type of prospect. There wasn't a ton of upside here, but when I'm looking at Triantos now, I'm starting to think there might not even be a whole lot of floor here, because while he's still making a lot of contact, you look further under the hood and there's a lot of ugly metrics going on, including a first percentile chase rate, an inability to lift and pull the ball, and really just an inability to impact the ball in any sort of meaningful way. So while, he's still putting the ball in play, he's not doing a whole lot of anything with it. And I've dropped him recently in what was really a pretty deep league, and I'm going to be dropping him quite a bit in my rankings going forward. I actually took a peek at your rankings earlier, James, and I think he's outside of your top 300 at this point, and that's kind of right around where I think he's going to land in my rankings as well. I think he's a prospect where, again, that floor has really dropped out on him, and I'm looking to drop James Triantos, the few shares that I do have at this point.
Yeah, Triantos hit homers in back-to-back games on June 25th and June 27th, but prior to that, it had been 68 games at AAA without a homer, dating back to last year. So just it's weird. Like it's sometimes with these types of guys, it's like the power is the last thing to come, and it's just like, well, man, the great hit tool, like he's going to get to 20 homers, but sometimes you just get to a level of the minors where you don't get those sort of like 0-2 fastballs right down the plate that you can tee off on, and or 2-0 fastballs right down the plate you can tee off on. So like, yeah, I dropped Triantos like 6-8 weeks ago in a league where probably 200 prospects are rostered. So definitely get that one. My guy that I dropped, I think, is actually maybe a guy that I don't know if I pumped him up on the last pod we did, but Ben Hess with the Yankees. part of the reason I dropped him was he was just kind of missing in action for a month. He returned at high A back on June 25th, gave up 2 runs, 3 walks, 3 Ks. Ben Hess still rostered in, I think, 16% of leagues, which is kind of nuts to me, but he was really good through his first. I mean, honestly, he had like 2 really good starts early in the year, and then the rest has just been kind of mediocre. So if you're still rostering Ben Hess, I think you can churn that spot unless it's a really deep league. Taylor, who's another drop for you?
Yeah, I love that Ben Hess call out. I mean, he's the guy who, the hope with him was going into a major league organization, they would help him, find his command and control. And I think he's rocking a walk rate of almost 15% right now. So yeah, that just hasn't happened. My next guy is Yoeilin Cespedes in the Red Sox organization, 16% rostered. Had a really nice DSL 2 years ago. Followed that up with a good but injury shortened stint in complex last year, and had a hamate injury, had to have surgery on it. Maybe there's he's still having lingering effects from that because he's really struggled this year as a 19-year-old at single A, just at 85 WRC plus. And he really hasn't shown signs of turning things around since the start of June. That's even lower at a 75 WRC plus. So I do wonder if he's healthy. But at this point, there's so many exciting arms that are exciting prospects that are on the rise, and Yoeilin Cespedes is just not performing, and his stock is falling. And I would rather just sort of jump ship now for a guy that's that far away. That's still a big question mark on sort of what he's going to provide you long term.
Yeah, that all checks out with me. Kyle, this one hurts me. I've dropped him in plenty of places too, but who's your last drop you wanted to highlight here?
This one really hurts me too, because this is a player I was a big fan of during this past FYPD season, and that's Levi Sterling, 18-year-old right-handed pitcher, currently in complex ball in that Pirates organization. And he is kind of a Thomas Harrington starter kit, except he's running into troubles down in complex ball. Now, we've got a friend that you might have heard on our 100th episode. His name's Raj, who was kind enough to do a little bit of digging into the Pirate system in complex ball, where he's got a little bit of data. And he was able to tell us that in Sterling's second to last outing back on June 17th, the stuff just really didn't look very good. In particular, the fastball is what I'm really looking at here. Because in that outing back on June 17th, Raj mentioned to us that his fastball sat just around 91, 92 in the first inning, but quickly declined from there. And his average velo across the 5-inning start actually fell below 90 miles per hour. Now, it's worth noting that he didn't pitch again for a couple weeks after that outing. So maybe there was an injury or some general fatigue there. Nothing that I've heard of officially. But when Sterling took the mound again yesterday, he managed just 1 1/3 innings while giving up 3 earned runs before getting the hook. Now, as discouraging as the fastball stats are there, the other thing that's really tough to look at is the fact that the command and control was really supposed to carry the profile for Sterling, and he's walking 12.5% of batters right now. So there's really nothing going on that is kind of proving what I thought I saw in Sterling at the start of the year. And it sounds like maybe, James, you did too. And while I'm still not giving up entirely, I have dropped a few shares. And at this point, I don't think I'm looking to hold him outside of deeper leagues with at least 400 prospects rostered.
Yeah, Sterling, I liked him a lot during the FYPD phase of things, but I didn't like that they didn't assign him to single A right away at the start of the season. I thought that was a bit of a red flag, because he was supposed to be this guy where he was just kind of going to grow into velocity, but he had the command, he had the secondaries. Why wouldn't you send that guy to single A? Probably because he wasn't ready to have success at single A. And I think Sterling is a pretty easy drop for me at this point. My last guy that I'll highlight here before our honorable mentions, Juan Valera with the Red Sox, just 8% rostered, but a right-handed pitcher with a very high ceiling. And, he's just been on the shelf with elbow soreness, and that's he didn't quite get to that bar for me of, reaching a certain prospect value where I'm going to hold you indefinitely through an elbow injury, at least in kind of, 300 prospect rostered type of leagues, 350 maybe even. I think he's a drop. I think there's obviously a high ceiling. Elbow soreness, that could be a thing where Valera's back in a week. He could be back in 2 weeks, but I just think the pitching prospect game in dynasty leagues right now, there's just so much happening. It's happening so fast. Why waste a spot on a guy who's not like a blue chip pitching prospect coming back from that type of injury? Don't know what it is. Don't know how long it's going to linger, but there's guys out there that you want to pick up so that the injured guy that already had some issues in the profile, I think, is an easy drop. So Juan Valera, someone I've cut loose in some kind of mid-sized dynasty leagues. All right, Taylor, why don't you give us a few honorable mention drops here?
Yeah, I got a couple of hitters that are 12% rostered on Fantrax. One of them is Yoeilin Rodriguez. I know there was some excitement about him being the piece that came over to the Red Sox and the Quinn Priester deal there. But he's really struggled since that trade and really hasn't shown much sign of turning it around. So I think at this point, he's a pretty safe drop and just one to kind of keep an eye on to see if he does bounce back at some point. The other one is Abimelec Ortiz. This is a guy who hit 33 home runs 2 years ago, but really hasn't shown the power since. And, being a defensively limited first base only prospect, doing worse in his second stint at AA right now. There just really isn't a lot to be excited about. And at 12% rostered, I mean, you can find something much better in most leagues.
Yeah, I definitely concur on both Rodriguez and Ortiz. What about you, Kyle?
So I got a couple of names here as well. One pitcher, one hitter. The pitcher I'm looking at is Trevor Harrison, 9% rostered on Fantrax, 19-year-old righty in the Rays system. I still believe he has good stuff, and his 2.81% ERA still looks really good. But when you dig a little bit deeper, you see that his K rate has plummeted to just 21.7% this year, and his walk rate has spiked to 12.3%, both of which are career worst marks by a significant margin. So while I do think there's still upside with Trevor Harrison, and I'm never going to bet against a pitching prospect in the Rays system, he is falling probably outside of my top 300 to 350 at this point. So I think there are leagues where you can probably find some more appealing pitching prospects at this point than Trevor Harrison. And the bat I'm looking at is Owen Carey. He's 4% rostered on Fantrax, 18-year-old outfielder in Atlanta's system. He got off to a really hot start and was a name that Taylor and I discussed on our podcast, I believe, as someone to go pick up. But since that hot start, he has really cooled off, and he's yet to hit a home run since May 8th and has just 5 multi-hit games since May 22nd, with just a 213 average and a sub 300 OBP in that span, while going hitless in 13 games and having just 8 walks over that span. So while Owen Carey got off to a really hot start, he has significantly cooled off since then. And he's someone that I am looking to drop really anywhere with fewer than 400 prospects rostered at this point, taking quite a dip over the hype that we had going with him early in the year.
Yeah, it was exciting with Carey early in the year for sure, but that's definitely cooled off. And yeah, I mean, I could probably find some Rays pitching prospects to bet against, maybe like Dylan Lesko, but yeah, I definitely get your point with Harrison. And they came into the year with like 5 borderline top 100 pitching prospects below AAA. They weren't all going to pan out. So yeah, that's the way it goes. A couple of quick hitters for me. I dropped Braxton Bragg with the Orioles a couple weeks ago. He's back from the injured list, so that could be the flip side of having an itchy trigger finger with the drops on injured pitchers. But he's been just kind of okay since coming back. Bragg probably still a guy that you could add back though, especially in deeper leagues. Very talented. And then Gabriel Rincones at AAA for the Phillies. I really don't know why he's not doing more damage, but he's just not, and he has to because he's got to just be kind of a power hitting strong side platoon corner outfielder, and just a 146 ISO for Rincon so far, AAA in 70 games, 8 homers. Strikeout rate's great, walk rate's great, but just not doing enough impact for Rincon's there at AAA. Taylor, Kyle, this has been a blast. Do you guys want to, maybe I'll start with Taylor. You could let people know where to follow you and where to kind of see what you got going on.
Yeah, of course. Real quick though, I want to comment on your Braxton Bragg call out there, because I did the same thing. I saw forearm injury on a pitching prospect, immediately dropped him, and then once he came back, I picked him up again. So definitely right there with you.
That's the way it goes sometimes. And I mean, if you're listening and you did that, like he's healthy, he's still talented. So go see if he's still available.
Yeah. But that aside, you can find me at Dynasty Pickups on X and Blue Sky. You can find my work at Prospects Live. And then Kyle and I have a weekly podcast that we've mentioned several times. That is the Dynasty Baseball Pickups podcast that can be found wherever podcasts are found.
All right, Kyle.
Yeah, you can find me at Sunny_108 on X and Sunny108 on Blue Sky. Much like Taylor, you can find me at Prospects Live. I've got my weekend prospect pickups articles running adjacent with Taylor's midweek articles. And like he said, you can find us every week on the Dynasty Baseball Pickups podcast. We tend to get those out every weekend, every Saturday or Sunday. Going well over 100 episodes here now, hopefully. We hope for 100 more.
Yeah, great stuff. Definitely recommend following Taylor and Kyle, listening to their pod, and really appreciate you guys joining me for another fun episode talking about prospect pickups.